Hey, welcome back to the show. And joining us today is returning guest Joachim Hagopian, who is an author, West Point graduate, former Army officer, and investigative journalist. I should say, current investigative journalist. Joachim, how you been?
I'm doing good, Christian. Doing good and good to be back.
Been a while since I've last had you on, and I'll just say the world has gotten hairier. That's for sure.
Yeah, lots happening here.
Perhaps you could situate us as it relates to what you see going on around the world and what you feel is most germane.
Well, we're entering now one full month, basically coming up. No, actually, more than that. Jeez, it's now going to be. It started February 28th. This war against Iran that America, Trump, and Netanyahu, Israel and America are now waging this war since February 28th, and it's now March 20th. So yeah, we're entering the third week, I guess, the fourth week. We're entering the fourth week now, um, and yeah, I mean it's progressively getting out of hand. Um, my view is there's a whole bunch of factors. Obviously, it's a very complicated world and complex, so there's many layers of factors that are causing what is happening now. One thing that was happening is the January 30th release of the Epstein files. A month later, February 28th, started this war. So, you know, Donald Trump was under increasing heat and a lot of scrutiny, realizing this guy's a pedophile, that we have a pedophile as our president. And I've written extensively on that, having written the 5 books on pedophilia and empire, and he was in it. I've been writing a lot about his part with Epstein, and that's why, for the all of last year, basically, while president, he was dodging the bullet. Not willing to even put out anything on Epstein. Remember that interview? It wasn't an interview, but the press were there, and he was surrounded by his regime team. And he goes, "You still asking those questions about Epstein?" Yeah. I mean, he dodged the bullet all last year, and then finally, January 30th came around, and the Department of Justice. See, this guy's a total psychopath, and he only surrounds himself with people that are sycophants that buffer him up and blow smoke up his ass, and they cannot say anything. They're afraid to say the truth because that might upset him. So, I mean, if you've ever had a rageaholic boss, where you're on pins and needles and you can only say certain things that might please him, otherwise you're on the shit list, and under a lot of, you know, bad, behavior from the boss. Well, that's the way this guy has operated. So he surrounds himself with the sycophants that only blow smoke up his ass and are afraid of him going off on them or getting fired, and so they only tell him what they think he wants to hear, and that, of course, is not the truth. And so and he doesn't do a lot of reading. He doesn't have a real grasp of reality. He's like a few months from 80. He's an octogenarian, and his mind is gone. It's going, going, gone. I mean, we talked about Biden for the 4 years he was in. Well, this guy's reached there at that age now, and his mind is going. And he's becoming a loose cannon. I mean, he's always been very brash and likes to spout off, and that was a big part of his appeal, with the whole MAGA thing. Oh, we finally got somebody in there that speaks their mind. I mean, that was a big plus for him to get popular, because he would blurt out shit that no politician, polished politician, would dare say. So that became a big appeal for a lot of people because they thought, oh, we finally got somebody that's going to tell the truth, that really speaks his mind. Yeah, right. Well, we're finding out that in his second term, and of course, the popular vote did vote him on a second term back in 2020, and that was denied because of machines and all the rest of the foul play that caused our elections not to be accurate. We have fraudulent elections. But anyway, I don't want to get off on too many tangents. I tend to bounce around when I speak. Um, so anyway, yeah, he dodged the bullet for whatever, 8, 9, 10 months. And finally, they were forced, because so much pressure was brought to bear on his administration, to come up with the Epstein files that he campaigned on as a campaign promise, that he was going to deliver Epstein file. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. He'll say anything to get elected. Oh, I'm the peace president. I'm going to make sure we're not entangled in all these foreign wars. That was his big line too. And look what he's doing. So anyway, yeah, they finally came out. It's I've run it. I did obviously some research as a journalist, and supposedly there's so many gigabytes that have not even been brought out. It's like 2% of all the Epstein files that have been released publicly. They will say that, well, there's another almost 3 million that we have held back, and that ain't coming out. They said for sure that that's the line. We're not doing any more. You got what you got, and that's it. Uh, but it's all basically to protect him. Now, obviously the public has been, many anyway, in the public have actually gone into the fine print and searched things out, and a lot of it has come out since January 30th, as far as information that we didn't even know about. A lot of the things I had already written about years earlier, because of all the research I've done with the Pedophilian Empire books. Um, but anyway, that got the buzz. Obviously, since January 30th, all the way up to February 28th, that was 1 month of just all Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. As of February 28th, with the bombing done in Iran, it's completely changed course, and the big attention now is, as naturally would be, is the war, where America is at war with Iran. And of course, a lot of it is the sexual blackmail. Israel, the fact is, obviously, the Epstein Maxwell operation was for Israel. They work with CIA too, of course, but Israel has all the dirt on Trump. And so they have control over him. And then, Miriam Adelson pumps millions, and a whole bunch of other Jewish billionaires are pumping millions into him and his campaign. And so he's indebted to all the people that have put him in the power place that he is, as a puppet, of course. He's a puppet. That's all he is. And so the puppet on the string does what he's told, or the strings get cut and he's no longer in the public and has a career. So that's why he does whatever the power structure tells him to do. And the power structure is basically Israel. I mean, and I've written chapters and many articles too. The power structure really has to do with the financial infrastructure system that we're living in, with the banking cabal, the manufacturers of all the big companies, all of those guys, and they buy off the government. They buy off the puppets in the government with, you know, blackmail and lots of money in their pocket. And so that's the situation we're in. And this whole war with Iran is because that is a it is the world it is the regional power of the Middle East and has been pretty much the entire time, even with Israel there. Israel would not obviously be a country. I mean, you go back to 1948, and the only reason why it became a country is they gave a suitcase full of cash to Harry Truman, the president at the time, and suddenly it became a state of Israel. But it goes back, of course, to the Balfour Declaration of 1917 and during World War One, where the foreign minister of Britain promised the Lord Baron Rothschild, Lionel Rothschild, that there was going to be a Jewish state in Israel, in Palestine. And the Zionists have been going at it for, a century and a half now. Uh, and so, so the bottom line is we have behind the founders of Israel is the Rothschild dynasty, the bloodline that controls the central banking system of the entire world. And then, of course, they hook up with other bloodline dynasties like the Rockefellers and a whole bunch of them are together. It's a handful, basically, but and they've had big money for, you know, I mean, the Rothschilds go back to the 1700s when they started expanding in Europe and outward to the world. So for a couple of centuries, the banking cabals have been pretty much running the world, and they buy off all the governments. You know, they're all puppets. Um, and of course, they set it up where, they create the conflict between these nations, which they control through the puppets, and they make all the wars and make profit off all the wars that they create. And that's just been history for the last few centuries. And it has not changed. It's, with every passing war, they use the divide and conquer, divide and rule as their MO, um, where they gain more power. With the more war, more profit, more control over the financial system in the world. Uh, so they've come to the point now. Well, actually, you can go back. You always have to look. You can't really look at any point in history without looking at what happened just prior and sometimes even centuries earlier, because it's all interconnected. And so, I mean, so Israel, yes, uh, right after World War II, they tried the League of Nations as the basically one world government. That was their idea. The internationalists back in World War One decided we need to have a one world government, centralized control. And I'm talking about the usual dynasties that run the world wanted that. They tried it with the League of Nations. It didn't quite work out for them, but they came right back with World War II. And in World War II, with what happened with Nazi Germany, of course, they backed both sides. So they were backing Hitler, his rise to power in Germany. And so, they had World War II, where more, I mean, I don't know, somewhere around 7 million. Well, so yeah, it's a huge number, more than any other prior war in history. World War II. Those are the two big ones: World War One and World War II. And then I'm going to divert way back to 1871, well, where ex-Confederate General Albert Pike, who was the top Freemason in the United States, ended up writing a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, the top Freemason of Italy, in 1871, and he said, "We are going to have three world wars," and he listed World War One, World War II, and this is 1871, And World War III, of course, that one's, we're in it now. It's a hybrid war, and not kinetic officially, but that's where it's going. And he actually specified in this letter to Mazzini that World War III will be the Zionist versus Islam. And so here we have Israel and America, the Zionists, versus Iran, the Republic of Islam, Islamic Republic. So, and they plot these things way in advance, and sometimes even centuries in advance. They've been wanting one world government for a long, long time now. And so they're moving in. Basically, the Great Reset, that Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, and King Charles III, Britain. That's their great reset. They actually collaborated together and with a COVID conspiracy. They bring out the pandemic, scare everybody into taking the death jab, and millions die. They wanted more to die than ended up. Of course, they're still dying every day from it. It's one of those things. Sometimes it operates on the spot, where an hour later the person kills over, and other times it's a few years later and they're still dying. Anyway, and they haven't given that up. Their whole idea of digital ID is based on a pandemic where you're forced into doing the shots and you can't get anything done. Everything's going digital, CBDCs, so everything that are going to outlaw cash, that whole one world government thing, where the little box here and the screen is your world, and you can't do anything financially because there's no more cash, and you're stuck. And if they use the Chinese model for social credit scores. If you have a mind of your own, if you speak truth, you have a low score. It means you don't get to eat. You know, you don't get to pay your rent. You're going to be out on the street because you don't have any access to your own earned money. That's where they're going, and and they're going awful fast. Because Trump has basically in bed with Palantir. Peter Thiel. And Palantir, the data harvesting on every American citizen to make sure they get a profile on every American and social credit score all lined up. This is what's happening now. So they're going to come back with more pandemics, which is nothing more than biowarfare with bioweapon kill shots. Uh, so they're going to do that, and they're going World War III with the war in Iran initially, but it's going to get extended to the West, the United States, Israel, and Europe, versus the Eastern powers, Russia, China, Iran. This is where we're fast headed. It's been this way for a long time. This is like Cold War 2.0, East versus West. So, yeah, and it always goes back. Problem, reaction, solution is their dialectic. Always they create the problem, they already have a ready made solution, and then the result is always more tyranny. That's where they have more power for them, centralized control, grid tyranny for us. So that's what they use over and over and over. That's their MO that has allowed them. And so they divide and rule. That's their other, basically formula for control. They always have to have an enemy. Can't have peace. Can't. There's never been a time where the humans on the earth have ever gotten together and decided no more fucking war anymore. We're done being violent and having our family members killed and all that. It's never happened because, unfortunately, there are these governments. I mean, yes, it might start off with some kind of feud between one group bouncing up against another group kind of thing. But now it's the level where all the governments are paid off through blackmail and bribery, and they are puppets. So all we have are puppet governments in a de facto one world government right now. They're going to formalize it very soon, where digital ID and the whole bit, so everything's under their centralized control. That's why this World War III is happening. They're depopulating our planet. There's going to be many deaths associated with World War III. There's going to be more pandemic, kill shot, killing people all the time. The cost of living, everything is going up so high. Even just the Strait of Hormuz, and we can get into the nitty gritty of the scene there in Iran and the Middle East in more depth. But the Strait of Hormuz has been closed to the United States, Israel, and any Western nation that's allied with them. Uh, However, they are making exceptions for tankers that are outbound to China. China gets most of its energy sourced from the Middle East, and other countries like India. There are tankers going there, and so they are outbound. They're going to Pakistan, but that's by permission, really approval from Iran, that those ships are still going out. And as long as Iran still has oil fields, of course, they've been attacked recently, but still, as long as they have oil exporting, that's also going out. Uh, so, and they've even come out and said, if you basically acknowledge that Iran has a right as a sovereign nation not to be attacked by an aggressor unprovoked, if you can say this, and then yeah, you can get the Strait of Hormuz ship going to your country. They've come out and said this, but you have to go public with it in order for Iran then to say, okay, let that ship go there. Uh, as long as you're allied with the United States and Israel, no oil is going to be passing through to your country through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's their rule. Which, that's pretty much. They warned Trump. They warned Trump, if you attack us, we are going to be forced to close the Strait of Hormuz. They gave many warnings of that prior to the event, but you know, Trump, being blackmailed, went along with it. Anyway, I'll just stop here and let you ask a question.
Yeah, this has been pretty much in line with what I've been gathering from other guests pertaining to the situation at hand. It is interesting. You've got the economic backdrop of things, the societal backdrop of things, and then of course the geopolitical element, which is all. I mean, it's all interconnected, of course. Um, I'm in agreement with you. I think we are we're in a global war. I think you know I I've been mentioning how Michael Yon mentioned how it wasn't it when I think the Iraq invasion was the invasion of Iraq. I believe it was in '03. He said things didn't really tick up until a handful of years later. So I surmise it would be the same thing. I think this is a great pretext to yeah, to your point, effectuate depopulation, to try and bring about a one world currency, one gender, one government, one this, etc. And
One
also
world
for
religion called Satanism.
yeah, and then Greater Israel. Just seeing this Pax Judaica. I guess that's the term people are using. I had on Mas Palsvik. I've had him on a couple times. He's talked about that at length. It does seem, and then seeing Jared Kushner talk about at Davos talk about the smart cities, the smart city that he envisions for Gaza, and I mean, just Israel positioning itself as this this next empire. And I know I've heard Netanyahu make reference to I believe the U.S. is kind of being Rome 2.0, like references to that, and This must have been when someone asked what book you're reading, and it was something about the Jews at the time. You know, I don't know, like successfully overthrowing or attempting to overthrow the Romans, and so a lot of references from the past, you know, that they're very into, and of course the numerology and the gematria that they they hold very much dear to their heart, so to speak, in the astrology, which is made to look quacky to your average Joe. That you have people that take this stuff very, very seriously, you know, out there in Purim, if I'm saying that right. You know, when the attack occurred, and I had Henry Macco on I think I had him on last week. It's interesting to hear people's different mental models of you know, his position is that it's all they're all controlled, you know, but it's Putin with Netanyahu with well, obviously Khomeini's now deceased, but you know that it's all there's this umbrella there, and you know these people are put against each other, or whether they're aware of it or otherwise. But yeah, and then what else was going to comment on? You know, I also want to mention about the growing uh, awakening, so to speak, amongst the general population. I've also observed, as I know you have, certain commentators that are in the alternative media space, where it's becoming now almost fashionable to talk about APAC, Israel's influence, you know, et cetera. And it makes me wonder, obviously some of these people are controlled opposition. Why is this becoming allowed or acceptable? You know, is this a means to identify critics to bring them out into the limelight? You know, you mentioned Palantir. I had a friend of mine, Tony in CISO. He's got a YouTube channel, and he mentioned about how Tucker may be, and again I'm speculating. Tucker may be inviting people on the show, and the information is able to be picked up on, whether I guess it's called Pegasus 2.0 or something, where they use Wi-Fi to they can clone your phone and all sorts of stuff that it's beyond consumer grade accessible in terms of tools, but basically inviting certain guests on who have certain views, and you know, creating this list. And so um you know, it's just kind of interesting to see what's going on. And then feel free to jump in any time if you'd like. And you know, just society in general. You know, we mentioned off camera about how you know a lot of people are having to tighten their belt financially, and you know, I've said ad nauseum on other with other guests. You know, Americans going to sell plasma. You know, having to you know, greatly downgrade their lifestyle. A lot of Gen Z, a lot of you know millennials, and people of all age cohorts, even a lot of baby boomers who I think are they're going to be left holding the bag, and they're going to be having a challenging time in their retirement years because of what's going on, all the money printing, and I think we're going to see shortages. You know, as Michael Yon has been alluding to, and so yeah, that's kind of where I see the puck going.
Yeah. Well, the Strait of Hormuz being closed, it's not only stopped the oil export of 1/5 of all the export on oil and gas in the world every day, but it also is stopping close to 50% of the fertilizer ingredient that obviously you can't grow food without fertilizer. And so uh, we're in for some very difficult times ahead because obviously it's going to skyrocket. There's going to be food shortages. There's going to be fuel, obviously, shortages of fuel. The prices are going sky high. People are not going to be able to afford to live and to be able to pay rent, pay food, pay gas. Uh, yeah, it's going to get real bleak. And it's all being diabolically arranged by design to depopulate the planet. We are all Palestinians. We are all now in human genocide. That's where we are. We need to become aware of this, that that is the agenda by the governments. And I'm inclined to agree with Henry McKyle about the east west divide, that controlled opposition is the east. They are deemed less evil than the Western powers, governments that are more controlled, obviously, as the bad guys, as the aggressors, starting wars and everything else that's aggressive to eliminate the prospect of any peace in this world. I'm inclined to agree that when it comes to global matters like the pandemic, basically China and Russia went right along with that. And I think that they play the role as the divide and rule, and they are the quote adversary of the West. They are not the aggressor, at least overtly. Um, but by the West, they are the adversary, they are the enemy, and starting with Iran. But the West hegemony, what's left of it, and it is crumbling. Yeah, we can get into this part too. The whole Gulf states, these are royal monarchies that have basically used their oil production as ways to make themselves richer. And they have bought the security of America as their basically savior to protect them in their defense. And what they're finding out in a cruel way now in this war that the US started is that no, America does not have their back. They are not coming to their aid. They are not going to go to war for them. They have only gone to war for Israel. Israel is their number one, even more than America and the American people. We've all realized that. Trump, Congress, they're all owned by Israel. They are not representatives of America or American interests. No, we are secondary. We're not important. The important thing is to make sure they follow the orders from Israel, which is basically following the orders of the Israel founders, the Rothschilds et al., and their little clique of dynasty bloodlines that control the world. So, yeah, that's what's happening. And I'll say this, not only 1/5 of the oil and gas, but like I said, the fertilizer. So that's a big part of this whole depopulation thing, because there's going to be shortage of both fuel, which can't be done without. Uh, there's going to be so many businesses. I mean, already there has been in the last couple of years. I think record businesses are going bankrupt. Even big companies are going bankrupt. Every week another big company falls. Well, it's only going to be obviously accelerated many-fold now. Where and the little businesses, small businesses, how can they even compete? They can't. And so, yeah, we're going to get a landslide of basically businesses going out of business, office buildings. There's record office space not being occupied in America because there's a lack of companies that are willing to be able to pay the price to occupy that space. So we're going to see a depression that's even worse than that 1930s depression. Very few people now are alive to know what it was like during those years. Very few. They were only little children, but there's a few still old enough that have a memory of it, but very few. And they're, of course, dying off because they're turning to be 100 pretty quick. And so we're going to see a depression far worse than that. That's the bottom line. It's going to get really ugly. There's going to be roving gangs out for food. There already is in the inner cities. It's not safe to go into an inner city in America. Your life is in your hands if you're out there at 2 a.m. in any inner city in America. Uh, and so it's only going to get worse where they're going to, go from the inner city where there's no food and everybody's scrounging just to survive to the suburbs. That's where, and it already has happened. We've had ripples of that effect during harder times, even up to now. Well, it's only going to get worse, and it's going to get fiercely worse. So anybody living in a city really is going to be shaken up with a whole lifestyle change. So we're going to see so many deprivations that we've never experienced before. It's going to get really, really bad, and there's going to be a horrible food shortage coming, and it's just it makes me so upset knowing that this has all been diabolical design by Satanists that want to kill off the population of this earth. And so they have pandemics and the digital ID coming in and the mandatory kill shots to make sure the digital ID is up to date. Obviously, abolishing cash. So yeah, it's going to get really, their control grid is going to be all about, what you do on a computer screen. And they have a means, obviously, of total surveillance 24/7 with companies like Palantir. Uh, and, Palantir is obviously involved in all the wars too, because who does the technological precision of wherever these missiles and drones go? It's Palantir that actually, knows where people are, you know, that can then be the object of the next bomb and the next missile being dropped on you. Uh, that's how Israel and America have been doing their decapitation strikes on the leaders of Iran. Um, Horrible, horrible, and they just got the security advisor, the Larijani. They got him a couple of days ago, and the intelligence minister of Iran. They got him. It's a horrible situation. Uh, this is another war of attrition, just like Russia is winning the war against Ukraine. It's a war of attrition, and and the same applies really to even the war with Gaza and the Hezbollah and Lebanon. Those are wars of attrition, and Israel cannot win them. Yes, they can kill more people all the time, and they do, but they're not going to win the war. And no war in history has been won if your only means of combat is air power. You cannot win a war on air power alone. And unfortunately, America is going to find out in Israel that their war against Iran is not going to be won. They thought they were going to be over in 4 or 5 days. Well, obviously, it's now coming up to fourth week now, and they're not making progress. Yes, they can kill people, they can blow up schools and churches and hospitals, and the civilian death toll in Iran is really high. They're really, they took out on the very first day, first few hours, they took out that in Minab, this town in the south of Iran, what, 160 or so girls and their teachers, the total of 175 people died. And that was a double tap, meaning that they actually, Hegzep, oh my God, that guy is so horrible, so evil. There was a civilian component that always worked with the military to make sure that the laws of war do not go against civilians. That is a law of war. A rule of war is you don't kill civilians. Yes, there is the, accidental that comes up. Israel has a policy of going after civilians outright. Well, so does the American government. So anyway, the bottom line is they purposely did that, and then they lied about it. Trump and Hegseth, oh yeah, we're looking into it. Yeah, and Trump was saying, yeah, I think it was a cruise missile that Iran did. Yeah, man, just lie, 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 lie. That's all they can do now, and they will never admit that they're getting their ass kicked on the ground. You know, but anyway, so yeah, that horrible thing. Um, it's a bad scene getting worse every day because unfortunately, Iran has been forced when their oil and gas facilities are attacked and destroyed. They then go after the Gulf state, both the U.S. military posts on all those Gulf state nations, and then their bread and butter of the oil gas uh, infrastructure of those countries are also being taken out by the missiles coming from Iran. So, and those are total desert places where it's all been artificially like the United Arab Emirates. Yeah, they're big tourist attractions, but now without the money coming in because they're taking out the infrastructure that's their bread and butter. All of those Gulf states, they're going down because they relied on America for their security architecture, and the security architecture, the world is finding out that paper tiger empire has no power. They have no clothes. That's the reality. The world is living with the fact that the West is crumbling. They're on the verge of economic disaster. Their economies are going. And then with this current war, that's now a war on the economics of both Iran as an oil producer and gas producer, as well as the puppet states that America's had in the Gulf states. They're all going under. And the rest of the world's going to follow, with the prices going up on oil and then the shortages with the oil and the gas and diesel. It's getting really bad, and the food, and Michael Young has made a big point about that. That's their agenda also, to do food shortage and have mass starvation. That's all coming in. That's all coming in. So, and with that comes also the fall of the U.S. dollar as international reserve currency. And when that happens, I believe it's going to happen this year. And when that does, that means that the dollar will not be worth anything. Um, the inflation, hyperinflation, it's going to get really dark and very ugly. And I hate to be the bringer of all this horrible news, but that is the bottom line. And so we have to, the answer to me is we must mobilize as a population that outnumbers our enemy million to one. We're talking about a handful of dynasty families with maybe a few tech families thrown in with the movement toward technology that's married with the fascist U.S. government and fascist one world government, obviously de facto. Um, so it's the people versus the central control grid owners, and these are the same families, starting with the Rothschilds on up. And so it's them. They are our enemy because they want us dead, and versus us. And us are all the people of the world that outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1. So that there has to be worldwide mobilization for resistance and opposition, which means you have to disobey. Civil disobedience is a must if we are to move forward. Yes, there's going to be punishment for, they can't take all of us out without the bomb. And of course, well, that touches on another little topic that I'll jump into now. Because the United States and Israel are losing this war of attrition with Iran, it's very, very clear now. Just in the way that Trump was desperately saying, "Okay, the rest of you guys, you got to help us open that Strait of Hormuz so we get all that traffic for the oil going out there." And no one came in. No one is willing, basically, to do a suicide mission of bringing their Navy ships in to protect the cargo ships going out. That ain't going to happen. The first thing that Trump said, "I'm going to have our Navy come in there." No, the Navy said, "No, we can't do that. We're going to be sitting ducks." And they have their aircraft carrier groups gone now because they are sitting ducks, and a missile can take down and sink a American big aircraft carrier. So unfortunately, the U.S. has not stayed up on top of the how warfare today has changed with the whole influx of missile production and drones. They are the kings now of how war is conducted today. And America is way behind the ball that can't win wars now. We're the big paper tiger empire that's going down. So, yeah, it's all not good. It's all not good. And I think we can never give up on demanding prosecution, because if we can we have to not just get rid of the puppets in the governments, but we have to get rid of the puppet masters, which are in control of the system, the operators as owners of this system and owners of the world. We have to get rid of them too. That requires mobilization on the population of the world to unite and disobey and do whatever we have a means of doing to try and combat the ones with the big guns. Unfortunately, it's an uphill struggle because they do have all the big guns. And yeah, Americans have more guns than there are people in America, but they're small firearms and not the big guns. But uh, they're going after that Second Amendment to get rid of the right, the amendment of protection for privacy uh, and self defense of your family and your household. They're going after that. They've been having all these mass shootings for the last 20 years uh, that are basically false flags, many of them, most of them, uh, to try and do that. And that's what's happening. Oh, yeah. And I was going to say, another concern that we all have to have now is, because this war is not going well for Israel and the United States, and Israel is afraid that Trump is going to, call it quits because so much of America is at stake, including American soldiers that are dying. There's already hundreds that have been killed. They won't tell you that, of course. Um, but I mean, official counts is as of a week ago or so was 200 had died, but we know it's more than that. And 3,000 are injured. These are American servicemen and women, and the numbers are obviously going up all the time. And then if we bring in, this supposed 2,500 Marine expeditionary group on the ships that are actually going to take the Strait of Hormuz, which they won't. Um, they just did the bunker bombs on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, you know, they're basically their defense system to defend the Strait of Hormuz. Uh, Bunker bombs that go way down into because that's what Iran military has done, whether it's their nuclear development facilities or their military weapons, those missiles, those drones, they're all underground. And they have fake ones all the time that are actually being used up by the bombs that come down from the air power of America and Israel. They're doing a bunch of you know fake places that aren't really their weapons. So yeah, there's so much happening, and it's not good for America. Uh, oh yeah, and the point that I was going to make was we have to be very concerned, especially if Trump he hasn't really found an off ramp yet. Hopefully, he does find one because obviously we are going to be losing a lot of troops, especially if they bring those Marines in. It's going to get nasty, and it could turn out to be another Afghanistan, Iraq, or Vietnam, protracted over many, many years where we don't win. Um, so we have to be concerned if and when Trump actually does try and find an off ramp somewhere and pull America back from this war. That's when we have to be real concerned that Bibi the Butcher is going to do a false flag on American soil, another 911 kind of thing, maybe on a few cities all at once, uh, to drag America into the big World War III Armageddon that was plotted 175 years ago. We have to worry about the false flag blaming Iran. We have to become aware that if something like that does happen, that's Israel again. They were involved in 911. They were involved in the USS Liberty, where that a few dozen Navy sailors died in that one. Many injured, 100 and something were injured. They killed John Kennedy, the president, the last really great president we had. Uh, they were part of it, CIA and mafia. They were all players, but so was Israel and Mossad. They were in it too. They had their shooter there on Dealey Plaza, also, and so they're involved. Basically, they've been involved. They stole secrets that develop their own nuclear power. Has any country held them basically in check? Has they been accountable for illegally, secretly, quote, secretly developing nuclear weapons? No, they get away with it. They get away with everything. They have been a terrorist state forever. Even before they became a country, they were terrorists, killing off, Palestinian Arabs. Um, so they have been the biggest enemy of America in the last 80 years or so that they've been around. They have been the worst enemy of America because they are the backstabbers of America. But because they use the money and the sexual blackmail to control the governments of America, they keep getting away with everything that they do. They're never held to account for all their evil sins that they've done. Um, so we have to, the real problem, the source of the problem is Israel and the US government. They are the terrorist states of the world, they are the pariahs. And with what's happening with the whole world now going into real hard times, who's going to get that blame? Rightfully so. Israel and America is going to get blamed for this. It, Iran is in an existential struggle for its survival as a sovereign nation. So when they're attacked, they have to attack back. And so when their oil and gas facilities get taken out, yeah, they have to go with the ones that are in the Gulf state that have been basically loyal to the United States, that have betrayed them because they no longer protect the Gulf states. Uh, so they're making life hard for the whole world because of the aggressions of American Israel. It's not Iran's fault. They're in the existential fight of their life as a sovereign nation. And then the aggressors are clearly, the terrorist aggressors are clearly the United States and Israel. So we have to hold that into account. We can't blame Iran for all the high prices that are going to go up and the scarcity of food and gas and all the rest. We can't blame them. We have to blame the ones that did it. And the ones that are doing it are these Satanists that are in control of all the governments, particularly the U.S. and Israel. So that's what we have to be paying attention to. That we're on the verge of some very difficult times. Hopefully, we won't have to go back to the Stone Age, but it's going to get really ugly, really ugly. And I'm basically saying on my Revolution Radio podcast this week, a good portion of it is going to be spent basically saying, hey, we don't know how much longer we're even going to be on this earth flesh plane. We don't know how long. We could be taken out at any time. So it's time to get right with God. That's the only way to go as far as getting ready for what could happen in the next year or two, uh, because it could get real drastically, unthinkably ugly, uh, just to stay alive. And many, I'm afraid, are not going to make it. Many, and probably even the majority population living today, may not make it, because that is their agenda. The ones that are pulling all the strings to do all this horrific things on this earth, they want 90 to 95%. We got a population of close to 8. I think it's been going down because they have had this depopulation agenda for some time. But they wanted at about 500. I mean, you know what? The Georgia Guidestones actually spelled it out. 500 million, a half a billion people from 8 billion. So that's 15 out of 16 people that are living and breathing right now. They want dead. That's the bottom line. We are in the fight for our life, for survival as a human species. I mean, I've been writing about this and screaming from the rooftops. We better do something. We cannot play passive and ignorant or end up so overwhelmed by all the negativity that we feel powerless. Yes, we have to. I mean, sometimes I get into those moods where I feel like, oh, it's just too much. They have all the power. What power do we? Well, we have a lot more than we will give ourselves credit for. If we mobilize and in solidarity and unity, we can make the big difference, opposing the evil forces against us. So I devoting a portion of my program this week basically to say, get right with God and seek out like-minded others, have some kind of social network locally. And I also obviously always emphasize their thing is centralization of control grid centralization. So the way out of that is decentralization, which means make sure that you have a social network locally, and that you work with partners locally on your self-defense behalf, because it can get really ugly very fast when people can't afford to eat and have a home, shelter. So yeah, it's going to get really bad, and so I have to make sure that at least as a journalist, as a truth teller, I try and get the word out as best as I can.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts today. I know you covered a lot of ground. You actually addressed a lot of the questions I was going to ask you, so I'm glad we got that all knocked out. I think on a positive note, to your point that the clicker cabal only has so much control. At the end of the day, the power lies with us. We give them consent. So I definitely don't think we're going to ever be able to vote our way out of this. It will have to be a bottom up. Um, I don't call it revolution or what have you, but yeah, or like a raising consciousness. So, I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, yeah, I agree with you in terms of what the agendas and things they want to effectuate. And I could think what is promising is that you do have a young cohort, particularly young men who are very based or very red pilled. They're not on mainstream legacy media. They are on X. They are on you know other social platforms where they're communicating, getting exposed, and changing ideas. And a lot of them feel completely disenfranchised. Of course, that's evident in their withdrawal for a lot of these people, their lack of employment, their delayment in terms of matriculating, and even looking at. I mean, this is I'm getting into the micro here, but the dating scene, right? I mean, people are not really dating as much as they were, or going out, and people are not having kids as much. So I think there is I think there's some hope there in light of what's going on. But no, I appreciate you making the time, Joaquim.
Well, it's always, even though I'm the bearer of bad news, but it's always a pleasure being able to talk to you and get the word out. Very important for all of us to do that.
Absolutely. And Joaquim, how can people learn more about you as well as support you?
Well, you can get all my articles at thegovernmentrag.com, also james8fetzer.org. The inteldrop.org also picks up a lot of my material. You can read every single chapter of my 5 book volume series on pedophilia and empire, Satan, sodomy, and the deep state. You can read that for free, available online at pedoempire.org. And they are bestsellers on Amazon if you want paperback or reading them online. They're there at Amazon. And in the categories of human rights and child advocacy. I also do several podcasts a week. I have a Revolution Radio spot on Fridays, and then I have a couple of gigs that I do podcasts with James Fetzer, who's a real heavyweight in the alt news world. Um, so you can catch me on those and my writing on the governmentrag.com.
Very well. Joaquim, always a pleasure. You take care, be well, and we will definitely be in touch.
All right. Thank you, Christian. Bye bye.
Appreciate you tuning in and watching. If you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed the video, you found value, and I encourage you to like, share, subscribe, /follow. The show is on YouTube and Spotify. Always look forward to your feedback, and appreciate you tuning in. Be well and take care.